Ahoy there! Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another episode of the Destroyer Pilot's Manifesto, the series that aims to teach you everything you'll need to know about the various different destroyers in EVE Echoes. In today's video, I thought it'd be fun to revisit an old favourite of mine, the Tech 7 Minmatar TALWAR Assault. Now, I wanted to take a look at this from the angle of destroyers being anti-frigate vessels. Ultimately, with the current meta being heavily geared towards interceptors, I wanted to see how the TALWAR Assault would stand up against these. So, we're going to have a look at the TALWAR Assault stats and see what that actually means and how this could be improved, because yes, I am very much of the agreement that destroyers do need some improvements here in EVE Echoes, and I'm hoping that as we go towards the April-May update, the balance change that's coming there, if I can shout out about this enough in videos, perhaps NetEase will take some notice and make some of the changes that we're all asking for. So we're going to have a look at the TALWAR Assault, talk about this ship and how it could possibly be improved, how to fit it, how to use it, and we're going to have some super happy fun times undocking it and blowing stuff up with it. Now, if you do enjoy this video, let me know by hitting like on it, sub to the channel for all things EVE Echoes, ding that notification bell to never miss an upload, and let me know in the comments down below what topics and what ships you'd like me to cover in future videos. If you want to go the extra mile to help support this channel, you can of course come and join us on Patreon, and there is a Redbubble merchandise store if you've ever fancied wearing the Catskull Academy or the Catskull Cartel on a t-shirt, a hoodie, a water bottle, even things like laptop skins, and I think there's even a blasted clock on there, for crying out loud. There's all kinds of really awesome stuff, and if you have some cool ideas for designs, do let me know that in the comments down below as well. Anyway, all of that said and done and out of the way, let's jump right in to talking about the Minmatar TALWAR Assault. As an assault destroyer, you'll find that the TALWAR Assault is up at tech level 7 of the destroyer branch of its respective empire, in this case, the Minmatar Republic, so let's climb up there, tech level 7, here we have the TALWAR Assault. Now again, as a Thucker Tribe ship, you can see it uses that sort of mottled white colour scheme to it. If you don't know, I've mentioned this quite a few times in recent videos. The Thucker Tribe are essentially a Minmatar tribe that travel around the Great Wildlands in these humongous caravans of spaceships. And they tend to value superior firepower over absolutely everything. So when you look at the TALWAR Assault, you know that being a Thucker Tribe variant of a ship, it's going to have bigger guns and more of them than other variants. I do quite like the sort of mottled white colour scheme you get to these, though we do have a couple of other very cool skins as well. The TALWAR Assault does get the smoke grey skin, which is one that you can just buy from the NES store. Over the Christmas period, we had the Yule Envoy skin, which gives it this sort of metallic red and green sort of finish to it, which is pretty cool. But my personal favourite, and the one that I'll be using in this video, is, of course, the Grimace skin. This is one of the Halloween ones, and I just adore this. That sort of metallic orange, the metallic purple, the bats around the back of all of this, the sort of bat silhouettes there toward the rear end of the ship, plus the glowing jack-o'-lantern face on top, just looks so cool. I'm a big fan of all spooky things Halloween-y, so if you give me a ship that, a skin that makes my ship look like that, I'm going to be using it. Anyway, to have a look at the attributes and fittings then of the TALWAR Assault, and we're going to take this opportunity as well to talk about some of the problems inherent with the TALWAR Assault, and indeed just with assault destroyers in general. So to start with, the fitting profile here, we have 4 high slots, 2 mid slots, 4 low slots, 3 engineering rigs, and 3 combat rigs. Now, the 4 high slots I've harped on about so many times. Destroyers either need a 5th high slot, or they need better skills. Like, rather than getting a 10% increase to damage, give it a 12% increase to damage. It's something that basically makes it act like it's got that additional high slot. Personally, I'm in preference of just giving it the additional high slot, because that increases the cost of the ship. It means that you need to buy 5 missile systems, or 5 turrets, or whatever, rather than just having 4, and the skills making up the difference. For me, that 5th high slot is a very important part of it. And certainly, if you're playing EVE Online, you'll notice that things like the Thrasher and the Talwar have a lot of high slots, in some cases as many as 7. Like, that's literally the same number of high slots you'd expect to find on something like a battle cruiser. And that's kind of the point, that a destroyer should be where battle cruisers are to cruisers, destroyers should be to frigates. They should be the battle frigates, really. Slower, heavier, considerably higher firepower. And they just don't really get that with only 4 high slots and the skills that they have. The second problem with that fitting profile is the 2 mid slots. This is a Tech 7 ship, and it's an assault ship. It's supposed to be getting right up into your opponent's grill, punching them in the face, and sort of doing hit and run tactics as best as possible. Now, if you're wanting to go into PvP, you're going to need a scram or a warp disruptor or something like that, so that's one of your mid slots gone, which then doesn't leave you much room for anything else. If you want Nosferatus or neutralizers, stasis webifiers, or any of the other E-War modules, you know, you're kind of screwed. You pick one of them. Adding a third mid slot and increasing the high slots here from 4 to 5, I think would really go a long way to fixing the assault destroyers. Notably, the assault destroyers I explicitly think should get that third mid slot, but I think all destroyers from Tech 4 higher should have an additional high slot. Anyway, looking at the rest of the stats, things do get a little bit better. If we look at the signature radius of the TALWAR Assault, it's surprisingly small for a destroyer of this size, 49.2 meters. That is under 50. It's still not, you know, frigate-sized by any means, and you're still going to be taking a lot of hits. You know, it's not a speed tanking kind of build, but, you know, it's not particularly huge either. It does help mitigate some of the incoming damage. The flight velocity, however, yeah, things immediately take an immediate downturn here. With that flight velocity, 258 meters per second is ridiculously slow. This is the fastest of the assault destroyers, and just 258 meters per second is slower than many of the cruisers out there. Like, why is an assault destroyer slower than cruisers? Just bear with that for a moment. I mean, heck, a hurricane can outrun the TALWAR Assault. If you don't see that as a problem, I'm not really sure what to say. The defense, though, is a pretty nice 6,719. That's more than a lot of ships of this size would usually have, and it does mean it can take a few shots before it needs to disengage. There are destroyers out there that are tankier, and I'm a firm believer in destroyers being the glass cannons. And certainly, glass is still a word I would use here to describe the TALWAR Assault. It's more solid than several of the other destroyers, but it's still a pretty fragile ship in the grand scheme of things. I mean, with that kind of signature radius and flight velocity, you would normally expect to have a higher defense to compensate. It doesn't have that because it is a destroyer, and I'm fine with that. I just think that destroyers, if they're going to be glass cannons, they've got the glass bit down, we just need to get the cannon bit down and actually have some proper damage going out there. The second problem here comes with the mass and the inertia. What we're looking at is a 1.65 million kilogram mass with an inertia modifier of 2.2. Now I get it, it's a destroyer, it's not supposed to be quite as, you know, nimble as a frigate would be, but when you're using things like micro warp drives and that on a ship like this, or if you're looking at the possibility of equipping torpedoes, that inertia modifier is entirely too high, and I really think that should come down to somewhere about 1.8, 1.9, just to give you the proper agility rating to actually be able to do stuff with this ship. Now, again, as I've said with other ships when I'm talking about like the assault frigates and the assault destroyers, ultimately on paper the TALWAR Assault is a little bit disappointing, and I've completely forgotten here to mention the capacitor bank. 513 gigajoules when you're going to be equipping a micro warp drive is just not big enough. You're immediately losing 25% of that the second you equip a micro warp drive, and spoiler alert, assault frigates and assault destroyers have those bonuses to micro warp drives, which means you should probably be looking to fit one. At which point, taking off 25% of your capacitor, and it's already a small capacitor, just causes big problems. I think we do need a larger capacitor here as well, but maybe I'm asking for too much with additional high slots, additional mid slots, lower inertia, and extra capacitor, but I would like to see some of those added when we get the balance patch. Anyway, moving into the trait description. The TALWAR Assault is, of course, a TALWAR, so it gets that roll bonus of a 25% increase to missile and torpedo velocity. That means extra range to your missiles, extra range to your torpedoes, and that's a really cool thing to have, especially if you're going for a torpedo build. Even that, though, you know, if you're getting extra range on the torpedoes, it's still a difficult situation because that inertia modifier means you still struggle to hold a good orbit, a nice tight orbit where those torpedoes are actually in range, especially even if you're going to try using an afterburner, you're going to struggle to keep that distance. But hey, maybe then we can sit there and say, well, what if it's designed around using missiles? And spoiler alert, that's exactly what we're going to be doing. As a assault destroyer as well, you get that 5 seconds increase to damage control activation time, which means that your damage control unit, rather than activating for 13 seconds, activates for 18, which is actually a pretty useful bonus. It means that when you're taking damage back, you can actually survive a lot of incoming damage. The difference between 13 and 18 seconds doesn't sound like much, but it really does make all the difference out there on the battlefield. Looking at the skill bonuses then, we have Advanced Small Missile Torpedo Operation bonus, 7.5% increase there, so it's 97.5% increase to your DPS across the board with small missiles and torpedoes. Now again, to me this does come out a little bit lower than I would perhaps like it to. This means that we could either increase the skill or, spoiler, just go for that additional high slot. Imagine, one additional high slot on this would add an additional, going from 4 to 5 would be 20% additional DPS. That's a huge increase. Rather than taking this from like 7.5, which is 37.5, up to say a 10% skill bonus, which would just give us to 40%, I think adding that additional high slot would really help. Advanced Destroyer Command, though, does give us some nice changes here. Notably, we get a 15% reduction to the warp drive signature radius penalty. That is, of course, micro warp drive signature radius penalty, and goodness knows why they haven't got the word micro in there, but it is the micro warp drive signature radius penalty. So rather than your micro warp drive increasing your signature radius by 500%, this will reduce that penalty by 75%, so you go right the way down to what I think is only a 200% increase at that point, not even quite that much, 150%. That's actually really quite nice. It means that when you're using a micro warp drive to like close the gap with someone, you are getting less of a signature radius blossom, meaning you are, you maintain that smaller signature radius. You're still a battle cruiser when you have that active, but that's better than being a battleship, I suppose, is the way to look at it. Finally, though, the Stasis Webifier Optimal Range, this is the skill bonus that I really like on the Talwar Assault, and it's what's going to allow us to fulfill the role that we've been talking about here of being an anti-frigate ship. 7.5% increase to Stasis Webifier Optimal Range. That's an additional 37.5% range to the Stasis Webifier, and again, I would love to see this just go up to 10% per level. Give us the full 50%. Why just stop at 37.5%, you cowards? But additional range on the Stasis Webifier plus additional missile range means you can actually lock down a target at a surprising distance and still be able to apply damage, and that is the strength here of the Talwar Assault, I think. I've been playing around with it an awful lot, playing with things like torpedoes and missiles, whether to use the micro warp drive or afterburner and things like that, and I think that actually rolling with its bonuses and going, right, okay, we've got long-range missiles, let's give them even longer range, and we've got, Stasis Webifier bonuses, so we'll fit those, and we'll have a micro warp drive to help us close the gap. I think that really does actually work. So all that said and done, let's jump into actually looking at fitting this thing, and we'll talk about how that works. I've spent a lot of time recently having a look at various different ships for a way to counter the Interceptor meta that is so prevalent in nullsec PvP. You've seen that with things like the Stabber Fleet issue that Vetamune came up with, and how awesome that is at taking out Interceptors, but I wanted to just keep looking and see if there was anything I'd missed. And whilst I was having a look at the Talwar Assault for a video, I wanted to come back to the Talwar Assault anyway, and just see if there was anything I'd missed from the first time round. I think this is one of the best anti-interceptor vessels out there, and it comes down basically to two of its skills. First of all, the fact that it gets that missile torpedo velocity, the extra range on the missiles and torpedoes, alongside the additional optimal range on Stasis Webifiers. Now, this means that you can actually lock onto a frigate fairly quickly, you can open fire with the missiles, and then lock it down with the Stasis Webifier, and approach and lock it down with the Scrambler. That's the theory here, so let's break this down. Now, first of all, I've gone for small missile launchers, not torpedoes, because as you'll have seen in the Breacher Assault video, torpedoes mean that you need to be right up into an interceptor's grill, and if an interceptor can stay outside of your torpedo range, well, it doesn't matter how powerful they are, if they can't hit, if they can't reach, you're not going to get anything done. So, the aim here is that we use these missile launchers to impact from a distance of up to 23.27 kilometers away. And I know what you're thinking, DPS here is a little low, 306 DPS, yeah, but DPS isn't the stat we're actually looking for here. We're looking for Alpha Strike, the amount of damage we can do in one single volley. Now obviously resistances take a big play into this, and I'm not accounting for that in the little bit of mental maths I'm going to do now, but if you look at the damage types here of this pithy C-type small missile launcher, you've got 209 electromagnetic, 209 thermal, 209 kinetic, and 209 explosive. That is a theoretical damage of what? That's 2, 4, 6, 800, 840 minus 4, 836 damage per strike, spread across all 4 damage types. Now, of course, that 836 is not going to be exact, because that implies that the ship you're firing at has 0% resistance in everything. Obviously, a lot of that is going to be absorbed, but that 836 is just one missile launcher. There are 4 of these. That's a lot of damage coming through. That's over 2,000 theoretical damage. Obviously, it's never really going to hit that, but the idea is that when you look at a missile launcher, it looks like it's got low DPS. That's only low DPS because it's basically got an 11-second activation time. The initial strike is very powerful indeed, and that's cold. That's before we activate either of our Republic Fleet ballistic control systems down here, which of course push that damage up even higher. Now the aim, as I said, is that you sit in a belt with your miners or bait or whatever, you see an interceptor jump into you, you lock onto it quickly, you open fire with that volley of missiles, and if that first volley doesn't kill them, the second one should. The downside, obviously, is that with a 11-second activation time, there is quite a period between the interceptor arriving and getting hit with that first shot and the second shot launching, so you do need to be able to hold that interceptor in place for that length of time. So the first thing we're going to do then is, of course, fit some kind of point on here. Now, I've actually gone for the warp scrambler over a warp disruptor because the 13.75 kilometer range is still pretty good. That's good enough for what we need here. If they jump in and they're within that 13.75, well, you've scrammed them instantly, they don't have a micro warp drive, and you do. You've also got the stasis webifier there to drop their flight speed. Now, the other side of things is if they're slightly out of that 13.7.5, well, you can immediately start moving in with the micro warp drive and hopefully close that distance. And if they decide that actually they want to do the hold where they're going to try and orbit around you and sort of hit you from outside of range, if they try to engage you, well, the stasis webifier means that you can maintain that distance because you've got the micro warp drive and you've got the long range stasis webifier. I've looked at people using like the Condor Interceptor kiting build, and indeed an Atron Interceptor that was using railguns to stay at sort of long range. A lot of those tend to sit at the 20 to 19 kilometer mark. Some do go a little bit further, and obviously, you know, that can be a problem, but you've just got to catch them for that brief split moment. If they come within that 20 kilometers and you can get the scram or the web off on them, you should be able to close the gap and keep them within that. That's the theory, at least. But ideally, you should find that if you lock onto someone, activate both those ballistic control systems and fire your missiles, that is usually enough to wipe them out in one volley. Again, if they do stick around though, a Trapper small shield extender is there just to help us survive long enough for that second volley to come out if they've gone for an incredibly high DPS build. On the side of rigs then, I've gone for 2 califaction catalysts. Now I know the DPS is technically higher with burst air, the bay-loading accelerators. Sorry, I wanted to say burst aerators there. I know the DPS is technically higher with the bay-loading accelerators, but the point is we want that big alpha strike. Additional 12.5% damage means we're getting a big hit in that first volley. We want that first volley to pretty much kill them, and if the first volley doesn't kill them, we hope that we can hold them long enough for the second volley. I found that basically when I was going up against the guys in the footage, which you'll see later, that was done with 2 of the bay loading accelerators, and whilst I do get obviously closer to firing that second volley, the first one doesn't quite kill them. I nearly killed them in one shot, so I came back from that and I swapped the burst aerators, the bay loading accelerators, goodness gracious me, bay loading accelerators, I swapped those out for the califaction catalysts to give myself the raw damage output there, and I also in that footage have not activated either of the Republic Fleet ballistic control systems. So the theory is that we should be able to go up against someone, lock on, and just wipe them out in one hit. The third one, by the way, is a bay loading accelerator, just on, you know, to assist with reaching that next one. Theoretically here, you could put another califaction catalyst, but the amount of, like, drop, the penalty that you get from using multiple of these, it's extra alpha, but I think that basically you're either going to one-shot them or you wouldn't one-shot them even with that third one being a califaction catalyst. That's my theory, at least. Perhaps you'll try it and get something different. Now, for the engineering rigs, I've gone for targeting system subcontrollers. This helps me lock on much faster. The idea is that if I see an interceptor warping in, I can lock onto it instantly, open fire and hopefully one-shot it, and a polycarbon engine housing is just useful for if they do decide they're going to stick around and try and engage, it helps me to close that gap with them by having a better inertia modifier so I can just maintain a tighter orbit and speed up with the micro warp drive a little bit faster. You could argue that, you know, auxiliary thrusters are going to be the useful one here. Top speed's not important. Top speed's not important. It's how quickly you can reach your maximum speed that is important here. Acceleration is the key. So I think this genuinely works really well. Now I'm going to put some footage on the screen in just a moment, a combat demonstration against a couple of Catskull and Void Interceptor pilots and how they engaged with this TALWAR assault. And as I said, that to bear in mind when you see that footage, that is before I made the change to go for the calefaction catalysts rather than bayloading accelerators. So the DPS was higher, but the alpha strike was lower. Also to note is that I do not activate either of the ballistic control systems because I didn't want to blow my friends up, basically. And I'm pretty certain that had I activated those two ballistic control systems on that first volley, it probably would be enough. Anyway, enough of me rambling, let's actually showcase this. The first attempt here was against Aeonax, and you can see that he warps in straight away at about 19 kilometers. I lock on, and this is a slower lock than I have in the fit that you've seen, because I didn't have the targeting system subcontrollers on here. It was a PvE fit TALWAR assault, but you'll see that first volley hits and takes him all the way into hull in one go. That is without the calefaction catalyst rigs installed, and that is without activating either of those ballistic control systems. Right the way down into hull there, beautiful shot, which, as I said, I've now gone and I've added those calefaction rigs, and I know that I should be able to ultimately activate those two ballistic control systems. So next up then, we have Hercules 4705, who came at me, I think, in a slasher interceptor. So he's about to warp to my position. I'm imagining that I'm sitting in a belt with some miners here, with an interceptor who thinks he can pick his luck. Ultimately, 3 people here in local. Oh, let's go check the mining belts. It's probably just a couple of miners sitting in the belts. Maybe I can take one of them out. So I'm going to sit. I'm going to wait, and when Hercules jumps in, again, same fit, I don't have the targeting rigs here, I don't have the calefaction catalysts, so let's lock on. As soon as he arrives, we lock on nice and quickly. I am immediately going to activate the web and the scram, and I'm going to launch those missiles. Now, this is against a slasher interceptor, so of course they're a much smaller target. I don't quite get him into hull, but I do take him well down into armor there, and I'm a little bit worried that that second shot is going to take him out, so I don't go for that second shot, just because I really don't want to kill him. But had I gone for additional shots, well, I think this easily would have been a 2-volley kill there, especially if I'd gone for those ballistic control systems activated or had the calefaction catalysts fitted as I now do. And there we are, second volley takes him right the way down into the into halfway through hull, and he's like, okay, stop there in chat. So definitely an effective way of taking out interceptors. So there we have it, a brief look at the TALWAR assault in action as an anti-interceptor, anti-frigate platform. Now, trust me, fit this like I've shown you, take it out to somewhere where you think you can fight some interceptors or some enemy frigates, and you will have a good, fun time. The amount of damage this kicks out in that single volley of missiles is absolutely monstrous. You will one-shot a lot of interceptors, a lot of the other types of frigates that you might find out there. Assault frigates can take a couple of hits, but you should be able to lock them down because of how slow they're moving, that kind of thing. I genuinely think that as far as destroyers go in the concept of being an anti-frigate platform, the TALWAR assault is right up there as one of the best at its jobs. The Corax assault, I still want to play around with it a bit more. It just seems worse than the TALWAR assault in every single way, but hey, maybe I'm missing something. So again, if you fly a Corax assault, let me know what you're fitting, how you're finding it, what kind of encounters you're running for PvE, how you do in PvP, all that jazz. I'd love to know more about that destroyer. I'm really struggling to find a good way to fit it. The alternative to this, though, and there will be a video coming in on it soon, is the Algos assault. That was another one that actually really surprised me at how powerful it can be in an anti-frigate role. But again, against cruisers, these ships do suffer just that little bit. Anyway folks, let me know your thoughts and opinions on this one. Again, I know Interceptors are the hot topic at the moment, everyone flies them, everyone uses them, and they are really cool, powerful ships. I do intend, as I said, to do that video of like the top 10 or top 9 or top 7 or however many I end up with, things that Benzie wants to see changed in the balance patch, so stay tuned for that. Do subscribe to the channel, ding that notification bell, and make sure that you select all notifications for that one as well. And there will be a giveaway in the next day or so as well. 2 lucky people will each win a month of Combo Omega, so stay tuned for that one. Otherwise folks, thank you for watching right the way to the end of this video, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!